Tower Hamlets now, in a complicated sort of a way, have more in common with those causes than they do with the causes of the people here in Wigan or in other northern towns. What happened to the society is that the elite has let the population go and looks elsewhere for succour and for support. Big capital and big unions are combining in a world economy with a would-be world elite that sees countries like England and Britain as stepping stones to their own careers. In particular, Blair is very like this. First, leader of the Labour Party, leader in opposition, then leader in government, then a leader of Britain, leader of possibly the European Union, but that was shot out of the water because of his support for the Iraq War. Then he was ceding for the idea of being head of the UN, head of the world almost, in a slightly megalomaniacal progress. Although Blair wasn't too confident when he appeared before the Chilcot inquiry, which for those who don't know is about the Iraq War and how we got into it. The Iraq War has many causes and has been a disaster from beginning to end. How many fought in it fought bravely, but doubtless in a couple of years some of them will be on trial. Indeed, the briefs for the trial of quite a few officers are already being prepared, because not only are you fighting against Mujahideen in the alleys of Basra in southern Iraq in front of you, you've also got tricky human rights lawyers behind you who are watching for the slightest slip or indiscretion or beating of the occasional looter and that sort of thing, which in this vortex of hot struggle will always go on. And if there is some sort of evidence, people will be arraigned before the courts. So we go to war at America and to a certain extent Israel's behest. We then engage in silly little witch trials of our own men for prosecuting wars a large section of the population didn't support in the first instance and don't support now anyway. 75% say that they don't support those wars. These wars are very silly on many fronts, but the major one is you do not allow millions from the societies that you may then tend to invade at a later date to settle in your own country and then attack their societies, cultures, structures, states simultaneously. You either say, no, you don't come in, or you come in and we don't go to war, or you don't go to war, but you don't engage in a messy combination of all of those variables. Liberals believe that everyone's the same and everyone can come and stay and we can all get on because things that have existed in human life forever, tribal identity, group identity, individual pride, gender difference between men and women, conflict orientation, the struggle between peoples that has characterised man since the beginning of organised life, these things can be wished away as conceits, as reactionary views that progressive people don't hold. Biology will trump all of that, because all humans come out of nature and go back into it. And the problem that we face is that the liberal ideas that govern our elite, whether they're in the Liberal Party, the Tory Party or the Labour Party, they all have liberal views. They all have liberal views. They all believe mass immigration is marvellous. They all believe the abolition of the death penalty is marvellous. They all believe that the European Union is something which should be supported. They all believe that these flags that you see around this auditorium are things that are just temporal, that just reflect the fact that this is a zone, it's no different to any other country in Europe or further afield. They have no pride in being English. They have little pride in being British. They have little pride in being a white European. They support wars all over the world, but at the same time, these people themselves lack the martial spirit. The liberal elite that rules us is leading this country slowly to ruin. And by the middle and to the end of this century, we will be in a version of the Third World. There are white children in Hackney, in inner North London, who are 2 to 3 per class, out of 30 to 35. Their culture will be totally disprivileged. They are an ethnic and a racial minority in those areas. They will never, ever see those areas change, at least in their early lifetime. When Black History Month is rolled out in Hackney, in central North London, as it is across London and across the big cities, paid for by your money, here in Wigan and Leigh and elsewhere, every white child learns it, and they're a small racial minority now in these areas. No white history for them. And if you don't have a coherent history that relates to you, you don't have a present. And if you don't have a present stroke of present at this time, you don't have a future. And if you don't have a future, then there is really nothing for it. And you will merge in gradually into what is coming, which is a large multiracial world splurging across what was once the West with a small elite that will include the elites of China and India and elsewhere. We're living in 2010. In 1910 we ruled a quarter of the world. There were many problems, but we were in some respects a great country. That's why we were called Great Britain. Macmillan wanted to do, he was a premier in the 1950s, he wanted to do away with the term Great Britain because he thought it was out of date and reactionary. We're still called Great Britain. When you get your purple Ribena-coloured European Union passport, remember the old English, British passport was blue, was big. Well, you could hold it in your hand. It went round the hand. The European Union passport's a tiny little thing that looks like a joke sort of passport, something you get out of a Waddington's game at Christmas. This is what this country's been reduced to, a province of the European Union. And yet we're still with America as we dither on the margins of Europe. And that is because we're besotted with liberal ideas, and it's because we have a liberal elite who have misruled this society since at least 1948, when the Labour Party passed the Nationality Act, which allowed the first waves of mass migration from the Third World to come into this country. Again and again and again, on issue after issue, economic, social, racial, anthropological, cultural, in relation to Ulster, in relation to European Union integration, in relation to crime and social disorder. The country has been let down and broken down, generationally, again and again. Cameron talks about broken Britain, and he says that the society is broken. He talks about certain cases, such as the Bulger case, which has come back into the news recently, as exemplifying the fact that Britain is broken. Well, he's right. Britain has a strong streak of crack running through the surface of it. There's a breakage in British society to which the Tories manfully contributed in the 1980s, when in the height of a massive depression they deflated and they cut public spending at the height of the curve as the depression went down, and unemployment in areas like this and right across the north of England and right across the Midlands went from 2.5 to 3 to 5 to even 8 million. The Tories talk about a broken Britain, and yet they devastated large parts of the north of England, such as here, in the 1980s, which is not being forgotten here. It's why the Tories are so hated in these areas, and why, although many people are now receptive to right-wing views, they will never accept them in a Tory manner. I want to say something about the Bulger case, and the fact that people think it's exemplificatory of the country's decline. Here you have two psychopaths, Venables and Thompson. Both of them are children. Both of them take a baby from a Liverpudlian or Bootle shopping centre and murder him in the cruelest and most sadistic manner possible. Both of them then get 8 years in a special unit. Both of them are then released ahead of time and contrary to what the public's instincts want. My general view is that it would have been illicit to hang Venables and Thompson when they were children. That's done in China, it's done in Iran, it's done in North Korea. We're not those sorts of societies. However, to hang them both when they were 18, instead of releasing them into the public, irrespective of Venables' return to custody, I think would have been a morally efficacious thing to do. Both were sentient, both would have been adult, both would have spent 8 years in prison, both would have had to dwell upon the prospect of what was coming for them, both would have known and at least understood, insofar as psychopaths can, the reality of what they have done, I know people who've worked at Broadmoor.